Hello everyone, we are live, and these guys join me every month, and I am very grateful that they join me every month. And aside from a hot flush, apologies, folks, but that's just how it is. But I think the thing for me is that the brilliance about this group is that we come together and just explore what is, rather than have an expectation. We are where we are. We all, I mean, I remember the first time that we stepped into this space and I said, we're going to do it on International Women's Day. I got these, it wasn't live, granted, but I got this message, oh, should we really step into this space? But on the most important day, absolutely, this is the most important day. But actually, if we all hide away from this space, then like how do we change things? And so I guess the question for you all, and probably everybody else who's listening in today, is it's the smallest of moments, because I think we have to make grand gestures. We have to be bold, and we have to do like giant thing. And actually, it's really quite small in order to be able to make a difference, to be able to have an impact. And I think all of you, just even stepping into this space, have an impact. And so I'm going to throw it out to you. So in your own, because you all have quite different work, but I don't know, I'm going to throw it out to you. So Matt, like, how does your world resonate with this world where we have to kind of just recognize what is going on?
Well, look, I do work in the burnout space, where so often the key when I'm working with people who are on the verge of or have been through burnout, trying to work out what happened and how they put the career back together again and make the right steps to move forwards. So often, simple little changes can make such a big difference. I was speaking with a client this week who we were looking at where he is now, and when he felt like he was really smashing it and winning, what's the difference? And one of the only things that he could come up with, which I thought was really fascinating, was, well, I used to make time for reading and expanding my mind, and actually that gave me energy and impetus and things to try and do. And so one of the things he's taken away with him as homework is work out how he creates the time to do that again. And kind of that's a little bit the same in this space in two ways, I feel, because one is it's about small things. Since we last came on this session, we've all had fantastic training with Graham Goulden, who spoke about, you know, being an active bystander is not making the big headline grand gesture of stepping in when it's at the point of violence or whatever, but actually it's the little moments, because a man doesn't choose the path to violence immediately. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey, and there will be little flags and telltales on the way. And it's so much easier and simpler to step in at the first little red flag than it is when it's a big major event and you're stepping in and being, in many ways, a kind of a vigilante or a have-a-go hero by that point. And that's no good to anybody, really. So it's about the little things, but also it comes back to welfare, like the conversation about how do we enable women to be safer has to really keep, one element has to be kept at its core of, we've got to make men feel safer and have their well-being in mind, because that's a big part on that journey that where things start to go wrong. So I think it's the two things. It's that the small bits, the small little bits, the small changes are so important that we can all theoretically take, and that well-being is actually really quite central to it as well.
And I totally hear that, Matt. And I think, and you're right, it is the well-being and how we listen better. Because you say a thing around listening better. That's my summary of what you've shared. And I go to a place of how do we share, listen better? Because I think in this really busy world, how do we do that? And that is really, really challenging, especially when voices want to be heard. So I'm going to throw it to Mark and Dan, because I know that between you all, you have this like plethora of voices within your own spheres that I think is really important, because I think the only way that I write about it often, the only way that we're going to change this is if we listen better. We have build, as Lindy Gordon says, we build better ears, which is about better listening. So, Mark, I'm going to throw it to you.
That's a very interesting question. How do we build better ears? Like, how do we build a stronger culture? How do we build a culture of the right thing to do? That safety thing, I mean, just where Matt was talking, as you were talking there, Laura, I was thinking, like, where does it place in what I do and what I see? And what I see a lot of the time with people that I work with, or groups that I'm working with, is that idea of what is safe. What is safe in this space? What is safe for me to explore? What is safe for me to say? What is safe for me to do? And I suppose it's probably a sign that to do the wrong thing is safer, as opposed to do the right thing is safer. Because to do the wrong thing is easy. It doesn't take courage. It's just following along. It's just, throwaway comments, right? That we don't feel has any impact. But the truth is, the impact is long lasting. The impact is cultural, as opposed to feeling safe enough to say the right thing, and to be, which takes bravery, which takes courage, which takes a bit of vulnerability. And it goes both ways. It goes from, in the male section, being able to say it, but then in a female section, be able to speak up in the same spaces. I was at a group, geez, this is probably about 10 years ago now, and people were all sharing around the circle, and people had brought stuff in from outside and put it down, had some representative of the journey they were on. And one girl was really emotional, and then eventually said, I can't hold this in any longer. And she burst out and said, like, this guy beside her, like, she didn't know him from Adam, and he had come in and he put the stuff he had on top of her stuff, just on top of it. So you couldn't even see the stuff she had brought in, and completely kind of overruled or dismissed her in the space. And it took her a long time to feel safe enough. And this was a safe environment. Like, this was an environment, we'd been there for 3 days and they created a space. It still took her a long time to say, this is wrong. You're wrong here. And it was kind of, the example was like, am I going to get support if I speak here? And I think when we speak in the right and people are tuned in, then we will get support, but we don't know that that's there. And the more we do it, the more support we begin to receive because we're doing it. And I think the challenge for us, and the challenge for anyone, is to speak in the right way, but then also challenge what's not happening and ask people, call people in, was I think we had from a couple of weeks ago.
Definitely.
If you say something and people aren't like, oh God, call them in. Well, what do you think? What is the right thing for us to do here? Like, is this acceptable as a culture? And what always stays top of my mind is my personal life and the fact that I have 2 daughters. What is a society and a structure and a culture that they need to grow up in order for them to feel safe? That's kind of my overriding question on a lot of this.
And I think it is, for me personally, I mean, as you know, I don't have children, so it's the acknowledgement of all 3 of you, your perspectives of having a child and how kind of shifts a perspective. I think there's a protective perspective, but it's also a perspective of like, what do we do differently, because we recognize that we need to do different. And I think it's so, I mean, there's so many things I could share, but I think it's, for me, Dan, I know Matt has a son and daughter. I am right in that. Oh, I am on Matt and Ethan.
Yeah.
Mark has 2 girls. All right. Dan, you have a son. I have remembered that all correctly.
Yes, that's correct, Laura. Well done.
So you can shoot me down if I've got it wrong. But I think, and the reason I say it is because I have just collated the feedback from listening circles over the last, 6 to 8 weeks, from Girl Guides to mental health resource to everything. And it's been, to see it collected in, it's just been absolutely, I don't know, would I call it fascinating? I'm not sure that's quite the right word. But what it does do for me is go, what do we do next? And I suppose that's the question. As you have like intimate experience from the experiences you have, how do we take it next? When the world, and so I can't give, I can tell you what they shared. They had a lack of a sense of belonging. Food became something that they didn't know what about. And so so when you hear those things, what do you do with those? And how do we make that different? And I suppose that's been the question that I've been like really sitting with today, which is like, I know this is complete left of field of what we were probably going to discuss this evening, but having literally read through, literally reams of paper of Girl Guides, Rangers, Scouts, etc., about what and where they were feeling it, and what do we do with that, and how do we deal with that?
Well, culture change is incremental, right? You're right. When you said at the start there, Laura, about it not being a grand gesture and a big performative thing. And I remember we were talking recently, weren't we, about legacy, and you really changed my mind on about what legacy meant, because actually legacy is about what you do and how you show up in each and every moment, right? It's not a one big performative thing that you do and leave behind and everybody talks about. And I think this is the same thing, right? And I think from the men's community that I run, and from these talks that we've had, and the training we did with Graham, and all of this stuff, and I've recently been working with an organisation called Upfront, running a workshop for men on how to be better allies. And what you realise when you start to do this work is we all want the same thing. There's nobody out there that wants the world to be less safe. There's nobody out there that wants people to not feel safe and not be able to go out and do the things they want to do when they want to do them and feel safe to do so. Nobody wants that. There might be some weird crackpot, strange people out there, or some people with weird disorders and things that do want the world to be more violent and less welcoming. But everybody I talk to wants the same thing, right?
I agree. I think 99.9% is like, no, we just want an easier, safer life.
Yeah. So now we've got to have courage. And courage doesn't mean none of us feel fear, because that's a human thing. Fear keeps us alive. But it's starting to shine the light on those fears that are keeping us quiet, that are holding us back, that are making us make, like Mark alluded to, choices that we know are wrong, but just feel a bit safer. And the more of us that are willing to have courage, and the things that Graham taught us on the the active bystanders. Some weird.
You're speaking.
is that, you know, there are tiny things we can do, and it's just about how we show up every single day. That starts with self-awareness, and it's about the words that we use, the language we use. It's about the energy we have, and the more we're prepared to have conversations like we're having right now, the more people are going to go, yeah, we are the majority. We do want the world to be safer. There is something we can do, right? Mark did an interesting post. I can't remember if it was today or yesterday, where his top line was, "We're all responsible for climate change." And I was like, "Oh wow, this is Mark going off piece, climate change." And actually, it was an analogy, and a really clever one. But actually, when it comes to things like climate change, people shrug their shoulders. They throw their, "Oh, what can I do?" When you've got China pumping all this stuff out, what's the point of me doing anything, right? And I think this is why we are where we are with our culture when it comes to women and girls feeling safe and violence, because we all just shrug our shoulders, go, "Oh, what can I do? It's not me, you know, it's not all men."
But you're it's so on point, and it's really interesting. So I'm sorry, I have to interrupt right now.
No, please do.
Because, you know, one of the young girl guide rangers, I don't know because it was anonymous to me, and she, so I'm told by the West Kent Girl Guide and Rangers person, she never said booty or goose, didn't, literally barely said anything. So anyway, so as it turned out, through the work that we've done through the listening circles, so my voice has been heard. This is what I wanted to say. And I wanted to say that litter, of all things, makes, and, you know, wrongly or rightly, makes her feel unsafe. So clearly that's not a policing issue because it's not a rule of law, but it made her feel unsafe. So how did she then take that to the next level? She took it to the next level because she then went, so what can I do with that? And this is through all the work that we've been doing locally. She went, okay, well, it makes me feel really uncomfortable. So what can I do about it? Well, I can get my local community on board. They might not be very on board with it. So what will stop you? And so she literally went through all of the questions, like these very baseline questions, like I provided her. But what it gave her was this, in this moment, she said, I didn't have a voice, but I had a voice. And I have found my voice to be able to do something that made me feel safe. And I think this is the power when we just stop thinking about like it's got to be this big thing. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm slightly digressed, but this conversation that I had with this individual was just so powerful because the West Kent Girl Guide and Rangers leaders say to me, she doesn't say anything to anybody. And to step from nothing to stepping into this space, I mean, like, you know, what do you do with that? I mean, that's incredible.
And that to me really sort of links in with your first question about the worlds that we work in and operate in and where the tangents are. You know, I'm looking at leadership styles that create productive, sustainable environments. And one of the keys to that is listening. It's, you know, I used to consider myself a good manager because I would always look out for my team. I would always try and support. I would always try and, you know, be there for them and be a friendly ear or whatever. But I talked a hell of a lot. I spoke a hell of a lot. And I think one of the things that I've really learned over the last few years is I should have just shut the hell up and just made more space to let people talk and called people in to do that. And you raised a good word earlier on, Laura, when you spoke about community. And that's one thing that, you know, I think is an important issue here, is that natural community points are to some extent dwindling. You know, the pub used to be the hub of the community, a really great community point. The presence of alcohol, maybe not so helpful, but it was a community place. And now we see local pubs shutting down at an incredible rate of knots. The church used to have a lot higher level of attendance. And again, whether you are inclined in that religious way or not, there's so many positive messages and community that come through there. You know, I'm not a particularly religious person, but I've sat there in a service and gone, actually, there's some bloody good life lessons in what's being spoken about here. So, yeah, those two things about growing good ears, shutting up. You don't learn anything by talking. You need to listen to get those pearls of information that you're talking about. And then community, and what can we do to call people in and make more community?
And I think that the biggest thing that, so I've listened, I mean, it's written from all the feedback that I got from the active bystander staff and the youth, or the voices beyond that. And the biggest thing I hear is just, we kind of need to slow down to listen and have better ears, you know. And Dan, you made, we just need to accept that the voices that we hear, that's their reality. It's not just and how do we change that? And so, you know, Dan, I'm gonna, you know,
people. Stop judging people. Stop making assumptions.
Totally, I know, totally. So look, I'm just going to throw to all of you a last throwaway line, because I'm really conscious that at 7 o'clock, some of us have to skip off to do like the work that gets paid, rather than the work that I keep saying, like, pop on, you know. So go on, you know.
The community piece is really interesting, guys, and this brings me to the point of what you're trying to kind of say there, right? And Matt, Ireland is no different. The church was huge, and up until mid-90s, that was the community space. That's disappeared completely. But we now have the Gaelic football. Our version of sport is the community piece in a lot of areas, right? And to the point, what's really good about that right now is that the ladies' version of it has now gone through the roof. It is massive. Like, my daughter, there's as many girls playing football under 13 as there are boys playing football under 13, which is a fantastic thing to see. But to your point about comparison, but actually listening, there was a brilliant thing I heard on the radio the other day, and it was this female sports reporter, and she was talking about the issue with women's sport is not women's sport. The issue with women's sport is how we compare it to men's sport. So in Ireland, the Irish women's hockey team got to the World Cup final, and everyone watched and thought this was brilliant, because we have a men's hockey team, the pile of crap, right? So we had no comparison subject. We weren't going, oh, look, they're not as good as those guys, you know. And that's the point, is to stop. And hence, like, you know, when I say to my wife, and we go the whole way back to where we started with this kind of stuff, Laura, I say to my wife, why do you should feel safe? There's no reason why you don't feel safe. Because I feel safe. Wow. Because it's my way of seeing the world, because it's my sport. So we're not listening, and we're actually just throwing our male assumptions on top of what's there, as opposed to go, well, what is this? Like, what's actually happening here? What's different to what it is? What can I see this for face value and not from my preconceived opinions?
And I totally hear you, but I would also give you grace over, we don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's something that
But if we don't know what we don't know, but we'll also never find out if we're not willing to listen.
Yeah, and especially
I'm totally with you on that. It's like that's where we have to build our better ears. There's been a comment here. I've seen how people react when they truly listen to it's powerful, and it is powerful because people want to be heard. They may not understand where they're at, but people do want to be heard. I think you'd all agree.
Yeah, we've got to ask ourselves, Laura, what can we do to make sure that people are? What can I do? Instead of doing that thing I was saying earlier where we shrug our shoulders and say, it's not me, Gov. It's like, okay, but if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Yeah. What can you do? What can you do to make sure women and girls are heard? What can you do to make women and girls feel safe? What can you stop accepting, which makes them feel unsafe? What can you stop walking past? What can you stop turning a blind ear to? That's what this is about personal ownership and responsibility, Laura, isn't it? We want the same thing. We want a safer world. We want people to feel safe. And we can't just sit there and wait for some other sod to sort that out.
No, and I think that's exactly the point, is that we have to recognize our own agency in delivering style. And it's really interesting. So I've been pulling together the feedback over the last few weeks, all the listening groups that I have said, and it's really, really interesting. I am not going to share it now because I am really conscious of time, but I will share it with everybody because it's really interesting about how people see what they believe is the solution. So on that note, I'm going to thank you all, and we will take it on the next one.
It was like a little EastEnders ending there.
It feels like that. Anyway.
Leave them hanging. Leave them wanting more, Laura. I love that.
Until next month.